Okay. Back in the building. Success after lockdown. Your brother EB without the Anthony Cologne. My brother had to do something today, but I'm honored and privileged to have this woman here today speaking with us. And her name is Miss Marsha King. So I just want to say thank you for coming on and just meeting you today. This is our first time talking, so I
It
appreciate you
is.
coming.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Eric.
Yeah, so we could get right off into it. I want you to start first
Okay.
because I get long-winded. So I
That's
can be
okay.
long-winded at
So,
times. And you've seen some of my stories, so it's all good, you know. But I just want to hear from you and just where you come from, where you let where you know two parent family home. One, how was life growing up for Miss Marsha King, and just talk to me if possible.
okay. My name is Marsha King. I am currently the CEO of 13 Liberation Village, which is my own personal nonprofit organization. We pretty much focus on being a support to those that are affected by the criminal justice system during pre-trial, trial, and then thereafter. We still act as a surrogate family. I'm also the vice president of a Just America organization, and we are a 501c4. All of us are just as impacted as well. And then I also act as a empathy leader with Dream.org. Dream.org was the first organization to even give me a job when I was released from
Nice.
incarceration. So my journey with the criminal system started in 2014. I was on a 22 count indictment. The feds came knocking. So I had to deal with that 22 count indictment. I was found guilty about a year later on 14 counts, and I was subsequently sentenced to 100 months, which is 7.5 years. My encounter was so traumatizing as far as um, I thought the system worked because I had actually gone to college, University of Memphis. My goal was to be a civil rights attorney. And I was
Right.
so very pro black because University of Memphis had just started with their African American Studies program. That's the Deep South. And I wanted to be one of the ones that made a difference, going to the courtroom, make sure that everyone had access to a fair trial, and then had an attorney that looked like them. So I was just really deep into the advocacy and civil rights with no idea. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when we say things, we manifest it because I wanted to be one of the ones that had a deep understanding of the criminal system. So I didn't know my deep understanding would actually come with an indictment, going
Mm.
through a jury trial, and then going to prison. So even though it was something that was traumatizing, it just changed my life forever because I was able to get an insight on how the federal criminal system really works, the disparity of treatment for especially Black and brown people. Not saying it doesn't affect other races, but I mean, the disparity, the data is there. So there's no dispute that most Black and brown people didn't have the same access to the courts as
Absolutely.
other races. So that was something that was just, for me, it was mind blowing because I was
Mm.
always told the system worked. I knew the Constitution by heart. So I was in there like, this is a violation of my due process. This is what you all supposed to do. And
Mm.
saying those things is what actually end up almost getting me more time. But because I knew a little bit about the system, I was able to make appropriate steps that in the end was very beneficial to me. So after I was convicted and sentenced, I just remember sitting in the back. It was I was in a one person cell because the next cell over had about 20 men in it. I think I was the only woman in federal court. They was like, "Baby girl, how much time did you get?" I was like, "I got 7.5, 8 years." They were like, "Oh, there ain't no time I can do that." That's a lot of time to me. So
Yeah.
when the U.S. Marshal took me and put me back in the truck to take me to Norfolk County Jail, Eric, I was in denial. I felt like I was in a
Hmm.
dream. This was going to be over. This was just something that was just to test me. I was just in grave denial to, I actually, you know how you see in the movie people, I think that was Hurricane, that movie
Yeah.
called Hurricane, where he was in the
Hmm.
shower, it was dark, and you had that one light. That was a really true story where I was. And I just remember feeling so degraded. And I'm like, I'm I'm not a criminal. So and they treat me like this. And it was just so traumatizing. By the time they transferred me to federal prison in Alderson, West Virginia, I was like, where's the law library? I want to know everything that they know.
Absolutely.
So what they did to me will never happen again. And I spent the entire I had 8 years, but at 85%, I would have done 7.5. So I spent the first really the entire 5 years, but the first 2 years I stayed in the law library. Every opportunity that I received, I even took a job where I can stay by the law library and be in the law library consistently because I want to understand everything about criminal procedure. What is it they could and couldn't do? What is it the judges, the prosecutors, what could I file against them? All of those particular things. Because one thing that I've learned in the criminal system, whether it's federal or state, the biggest issue that a lot of people have with getting a fair trial and a fair sentence is a biased judge and a biased prosecutor. That people just
Hmm.
think that nothing can be done to these judges and prosecutors. So I want to understand what are the laws they have to abide by, which is the same that really we have to abide by too.
Blah blah. Yep. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I had a very unfair judge Rebecca misconduct against her. And I was able to get out of her courtroom. Had I stayed in her courtroom, I would have done my entire sentence because she was one of the judges that actually absolutely did not grant any sentence reductions under the First Step Act. How's no one qualifies in her courtroom. But she also had a long pattern of being unfair to people that come in her courtroom and trying to intimidate them. So I filed a judicial misconduct against her and I was moved from her courtroom. So that was just the beginning.
Nice.
Like I want to teach
That's good.
everybody how to
No,
do it.
that's
These
that's
judges are accountable.
that's right. Very important what you're saying because like if had you not did your research, like you said, you'd have been doing your whole sentence. You know, a lot of us don't know when we
Right,
go in there that we have those rights, and a lot of times the judges and the DA and the prosecutor, all of they have to abide by those same rights that we have. You know, so
right,
that's a big up that you, and I think it speaks to where you were before you came to prison, you know, and your mindset and wanting to be what you wanted to be, you know, in this system, learning this system and understanding it, you
right,
know. So I think that helped you a lot, you know. When I when I went through the system, and I went through the system, and I was oblivious. My knowledge was nowhere. I had no knowledge of nothing. All I knew was I get some money and pay for a lawyer, and the lawyer do his job. So anything else to me was like I couldn't even fathom it. It wasn't until I
right,
did go upstate and I met a couple of brothers that worked in the law library that pulled me in and said you need to work on their case instead of being in that yard, and you know that allowed me to work in the law library for 13 years. So I received, you know, my
wow,
legal research and management certification, you know, where I
right,
wanted to help others because I began to look at me and myself and doing my self introspection and I was guilty for my crime. However, I was fighting it, because of what you said, how there are, the laws, it works in mysterious ways too, where they have to, you have these charges, and you have these policies and things in place that they have to live, abide by. And if they don't, you can get a reversal at some points for certain things that they don't do
Right.
right, certain proceedings that they don't do. So that I want to say big up to you on that. If I could ask you a quick question, as
Sure.
far as um prior to you coming to prison, like were you ever in jail, locked up before that? And how was your life growing up? And where did you grow up at? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Eric, I had a good childhood. I grew up in a two-parent home. My dad was a sanctified
Nice,
preacher in Memphis. He was a constant. Him and my mom are still together. They've been together almost 50
nice.
years. I went
Mm,
to church every Wednesday,
congratulations.
Friday, and Sunday. So
That's
I was in
right.
church a lot. My upbringing was great. Um, my dad, like some of the lessons that he actually taught me growing up, him and my mom, it was actually instrumental in helping me get through my time. So I had a great childhood. It was five of us. Um, I mean, we had a great close knit family. So when I was indicted and actually went to prison, my mom and dad, that was a
Mm,
people just attacked them because it was like, oh, he a preacher, and they grew up in the church, and she ended up getting indicted. And my dad, oh my God, he was just so supportive throughout the whole entire process from beginning to ending. One thing that I found that the church does, not all of them, but some of them, the church sometimes encourage you to make bad judicial decisions that can affect your life long term, all in the name of God,
mm,
instead of separating the
mm,
two. And my dad didn't do that. And
nice.
I mean, they'll tell you, just do this, God is going to take care of this, instead of really using thinking about the future consequences, and not bringing religion into it. So I was surprised at how supportive, and you know, don't get me wrong, my dad didn't get up there and say loud or nothing like that, but
Hmm.
he also didn't say go in there making no confessions either.
That's right.
He
That's
just gave
right.
like wisdom. Be wise in the things that you say. Be wise in how you carry yourself throughout this proceeding. Just be wise in what you respond to, and not and what you don't respond to. So that advice was really, really beneficial through my pretrial, trial, and even throughout my incarceration. I was 36 years old, Eric, when I went to prison. That's older because you're used to most
Yeah,
people going 20s, early late teens,
that's right.
and things of that nature. So I was 36 years old, and it was just a culture shock
That's
to
what I
me,
was
being
about
an
to
older
say.
person, yeah, going through the system. But it was beneficial because I was able to think things out. And then let me tell you something. When you going in that courtroom, you got to have some courage, because it's just almost sometimes, and maybe it's just me, it's
No,
almost
it's
like you
not.
go back in time to slavery, because here you
No,
had
it's
this
not.
person
You're
in front
right.
of you that don't look like you, and calling you all these names, and putting things on you that have nothing to do with your case,
And you
talking
can't
about
speak.
and you can't say nothing, because if you
Yeah,
say something, and I've even seen the judges do it now, which has nothing to do with your sentencing, that's not taking responsibility. If you say, well, I didn't lie about this, or I didn't do this, or I'm not responsible about this. So you have to sit there and you have to take it. And they really
yeah,
start to devalue you as a person. You have to be mentally and emotionally strong or sometimes the way they talk to you and the prosecutor and the judge, because they team, I don't care what nobody say, they team up against you.
Absolutely.
It can break you mentally and emotionally to the point you start questioning yourself. But see,
Hmm.
in my own self, I
Hmm.
I spoke up on some things because I wanted to know. I understood that what's on record counted, and I was like, "That's not true. That never happened." But what I did was I put it on paper in a way that it couldn't be disputed as to uh, what I said or what I felt was done or wasn't done. So, but to answer your
Facts.
question, my childhood was awesome, and that was so beneficial to getting me through the system. However, the judge chastised me too. Oh, you grew up in a good home. You didn't have any business living this type of lifestyle. You didn't have any business doing this. Now, mind you, when the feds came and actually indicted me, they indicted me for something that happened almost 6 years ago. So it was six long time ago. They came before the clock struck 12 and they lost their statute of limitation, which they did lose statute of limitation on certain years, but they came about some things that happened a long time ago. So
Hmm.
I can't remember what happened back in 2008. It's 2014.
Right, right. If you could, if not, that's understandable. Could you share with our followers and the audience of what this word that you were charged for?
Just simply tax. It was a tax case. I was indicted on fraudulent tax returns back from 2008. So they, from what I understand, they had a hard time investigating the case, and some of the things they even brought into my case, I knew zero about.
Hmm.
Some people I didn't even know these people, which was totally. It must have been an investigation on something totally independent.
Yeah,
But they tried
that's
to
them
bring it all
fluffing their
together.
case on you.
Right. So I couldn't get them no information because I didn't even know some of these people. Some of these people were in a different state, but nevertheless, it was a tax case.
Okay, so because I think about what you said when you said you went, to prison in your 30s. And that definitely, when you said that to me, I was like, wow, like the culture shocked at that and the trauma on top of that, like going, just going and experiencing this situation of you get, coming behind these bars and, not being able to go home. Could you share with us your your just your state of mind just on, and I know you spoke a little bit about it, but just on being in prison for the first time, like behind these bars, how did that feel?
The first 2 years were my hardest years because I had just had a baby. When I was arrested, I was 8 months pregnant. So once I had my daughter, the trial began. I think she was about the trial began right at the point she was about to turn one, and it concluded on her birthday, and I was sentenced a year later. So those
Mm,
first 2 years, being a first time mother, is where I developed mental health issues with anxiety because I would just constantly. They took me into custody immediately, so that was so traumatic that it caused me to have anxiety. So for the first 2 years, I struggled with anxiety and sleep, and then it made it a little bit easier because most of the women that I was around when I first arrived in federal prison were older women. So the young people kind of came in my third year. So the women, they were older and they were so comforting. It felt sometimes like I wasn't even in prison because the support
mm,
system at where I was located in Alderson, West Virginia, it was something so different that I had ever seen. Like the women were
wow,
more, they were so family oriented. I
family,
remember my
yo,
first day, and the lady that helped me, Miss Angie, she passed away 2 weeks ago. But when I first
bless
got
her.
there, and it just gave me chills thinking about it, she hugged me, and it was the warmest hug that I had ever received, and I just cried from the joy. the transition of going through uh, to get into the prison from leaving my daughter. So it was just the warmest hug that I had ever received. And those first 2 years, they were just a family oriented environment that was so supportive. So it made those first 2 years, even though my anxiety set in, just the support
Mm-hmm.
again from women saying, do this or do that, this is what's going to help you. That was so beneficial because after the first 2 years, that's when BOP started changing and camp was no longer camp. It started feeling like actually real penitentiary time because they had changed officials and they were trying to treat all the prisons, no matter what classification you were, the same. So that support from the first 2 years was beneficial in the last 3 years, as far as helping me
Mm.
get through my time and what the women taught me on how to survive during that prison time.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, because I don't even know anyone that's like women that is a female that's been in federal prison. How was that was in there for y'all for women? Was it progressive? Did they have a lot of education? Did they have programs, positive programming and self help therapeutic programming? How was that for
The first 2 years, it was. And the reason why is because the women that were there, they were so determined to make sure that the time that they served was not in vain. They were creating their own programs. Uh,
y'all?
and
Nice.
that was one of the things that, like Miss Angie, these women taught me, like, when you walk out of here, make sure you have something you can lean on. And that's where I learned things about nonprofit organization, because you had CEOs from nonprofit organizations, you had first lady of churches, like you had women that had a lot of education that would just sit down and have those conversations with you on organization management and different things such as that, because I didn't know anything about a nonprofit organization. Um, or I didn't, I mean, I even met lawyers, which is how I became, got into advocacy. That
Nice.
actually sat down, it was like the level that you understand and you've never been to law school is something I've never seen. So let me show you where you can improve, which is how
Mm,
they taught me how to format my own motions.
that's
So
right.
that was those first 2 years with these women were so beneficial as far as the education and even helping with mental health, because you had people that were into were mental health specialists that will help you deal with your mental health and tell you what you could do to get better so you won't fall into depression. And they were such a supportive. They found someone that didn't have things, or when you first got there, they will basically give you everything: soap, lotion, to help you get started, or until you receive the job that you can take care of yourself. So the support was something that I've never seen before.
Absolutely. That I applaud that because even in like I've only been in New York State prison and I served 27 years and 6 months in there. I went, at a young age, and when I did go, there were men in there that were creating their own programs for brothers like myself that was coming
Right.
in, young, and just telling us. And I became one of those creators after growing up in there. After a couple of years in my growth and development, I became a self help therapeutic uh, uh, peer mentor. I also taught HIV and AIDS. I was a
Wow.
senior peer mentor on that, and we also had fatherhood and mentoring classes. That we created. We also created a nonprofit organization that worked with senators and clergy people in New York
Wow.
State that used to
Okay.
come into the system. They used to come back in because we used to gather the population to give any donations they could to us. And what we did was we found events that happened out in society, like in Jersey, this girl got shot and she was an innocent bystander. and she was a
Wow.
quadriplegic, and we raised monies where the senators and the clergy, they seen that we raised 7,000, so they matched our money. Each
Wow.
each senator matched our 7,000, and we were able to buy the girl a van for her disability. We
That's
also
awesome.
did gun buyback programs in prison. In our neighborhoods that we grew up with. So I'm from the Bronx, New York, and we used to do gun buyback programs with the senators. They out here and we inside, and we used to raise the money and have um, buyback programs in the Bronx and Brooklyn
Wow. That's
and
awesome.
Manhattan. So I see that, even under our circumstances, because I'm quite sure that you came into a lot of black women in there, in the prison system, um, as
Yes.
well, and I see that even with our backs against the wall, we always create, whether it's man or woman, and this ain't this I'm not devaluing white people, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? In terms of,
Yeah.
it's a majority of us are blacks in the prison system now. Maybe there was a time where that wasn't the case, but it is the case now. And that being
Case
the
now.
case,
That's true.
we always created things because we always wanted to be better. Even those that were guilty in there,
Right.
we always wanted to be better than what society thought of us as. So that I want to applaud you for that as well. Um, so
Thank
if you
you.
could, that day of being released, how was that feeling for you? Like, how was that?
So I was released under the First Step Act, and during that time it was COVID, and I had qualified for the CARES Act, but I filed a motion um, under the First Step Act under extraordinary and compelling circumstances. And I had cited how I self taught myself law, stayed out of trouble. I was a mentor at Alderson. I was given jobs that wasn't available to everyone. I had helped a lot of women in their release. Um, so I cited all of that as extraordinary, compelling circumstances. And 30 days later, I was released June 30th. I'll never forget it, June 30th, 2020. So I didn't get any
Wow.
sleep the night before because I just didn't know what it would feel like once I walked out of those doors. So we stayed in the back for about 20 minutes uh, before I was released. And when they finally drove us to the front, I remember seeing my daughter, and I had seen her all the time in visit and on video visits, and I would just remember looking at her, and she hugged me, and I said, "Oh, she just looks so different. I wonder what she does. She even remember me?" So I just remember, even though I was so happy, I just remember the anxiety of motherhood kicking in because now I had to reacquaint myself with my daughter. So it was just a
Mhm.
mixture of feelings, but I received so much support from people all around the world because my sister, I have a twin sister, she had advocated for me the entire 5 years that I was incarcerated because the unfairness of my
Nice.
case. So I had so much support nationally, and so many people were really just so supportive and beneficial in trying to help me when I was released. So it was just a mixture of emotion, but it was actually too, once we got to the house, the realization that everything felt so different.
Hmm.
I remember just feeling more comfortable sitting in a room and just being scared too after everything settled down that night. I was afraid
Mm.
because I had to learn how to live out here again.
Again, absolutely. And I want to say congratulations. Right? So you came home
Thank you.
approximately 2 months before me. I came home August 10th, 2020.
Okay.
And that's and
Wow.
since been off since and I had 25 years to life. Since been off parole August 10th, 2023 of last year. Just got off parole.
Awesome.
So
Okay. I got off
I'll
supervised
definitely.
release August 18th.
Okay,
So,
that's beautiful.
yep,
That's
August
beautiful.
18th, 2023 too. Yep.
No question. Yeah. So this is where I just want to tap into if we could, because I think this is serious right here. We're
Okay.
gonna go to this next segment of our conversation.
Okay, it's on the beat.
So this is what we call our cell therapy session. On StreamYard. We just started
Okay.
this, and it's dealing with the mental health aspect part of not only in the prison system but life in general. So I just want to
Yeah.
touch on that. How deep was the mental state of of us in that being put in that situation with prison to you. Well, how deep was that with your mental state? How important was that?
The middle state, I think that that was the most traumatic part because I never had any anxiety or anything such as that before prison. So the
That's
trauma
important.
itself of the system and the onset of anxiety, because I didn't even know what it was that I was feeling. I just knew I couldn't sleep. I just knew that my brain would just go, 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 and would never stop. So some days I would just, because it will always last 2 weeks, and I would just stay to myself, wouldn't get any sleep, and my brain would just turn. Uh, and when people would talk to me, my conversation would be limited. So it took someone to tell me that I was experiencing
Mm,
anxiety, and they one of the women said the best way to deal with that is, because a lot of women always walked. We had this big track, so they will always get a party and walk, and I didn't know why, but it was to deal with the anxiety. So she was like, just in the evening time, when you get done with everything after dinner, go down a hill and just walk and just pray. So that's when I realized that I had developed mental health from the trauma of what I had gone through. And then once I was released, I realized too, a lot of us go in, especially our men, they go in and they develop mental health issues and then are released and they go straight back to working, taking care of their family, and they're never able to deal with the mental health, which is why you have people that sometimes return back to prison or end up having a lot of mental health breakdowns. So when I
hmm
started to see, once I was released, I was right back at the first 2 years in prison. I started right back having the same issues. I couldn't sleep. I would be up for days. So I couldn't sleep. I was sitting in the room all day with the door closed. So I realized, okay, it's like it started all over again. So I have to learn how to live out here again. So what I
hmm
did was I immediately sought mental health counseling. And I stayed in counseling for 18 months and to
No,
get
that's right.
help that I needed, because I needed to be whole for myself, but I especially needed to be whole for my daughter, because I felt she already lost me for 5 years. And then to have to come out and not have her mother be present, and then I'm physically there, but not mentally there. It was just important to me to be mentally healthy. And those 18 months were so beneficial to me getting where I am, because Eric, I didn't work. I told my PO, I can't possibly come out here and just jump right back into society, and and then you all think that I'm just gonna be okay. And then when he would just pop up, I even had to tell him with that. I was like, that is traumatic. When you just pop up at my house
Pop
and
up,
you're knocking
yeah.
on the door.
Don't announce it.
Call me.
That's right.
Call me because I'm like, it's so traumatic. So by the grace of God, God is so good that He just gave me really good probation officers that were really understanding of the mental health issues that needed to be addressed, and allowed me an opportunity before dropping back out to society to address those mental health issues and to get some
Nice.
stability for that, because I didn't start working until 2023. Okay. And that's when I started with dream.org. And then even with them, um, one of the ladies, Miss Ruby, that actually was my reporting person for my internship, she's formally impacted, but she also deals with helping people with mental health issues. So I realized I was better, but I still needed some work because she was like,
Right.
"Oh, do you go anywhere? You always in the house. I never see you do anything." So she started helping me too, with my mental health issues. On okay, today this is what we're gonna do. You're gonna go out to this place for an hour, and you're gonna do this. And I started to be able to break out of those restraints of I was still living like an incarcerated person.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's so deep too. That's real deep because you know, there's a lot of trauma that goes on within the system itself. Just I mean, and it could be any little thing, from the cell bars clanking. You hear the cell bars every day to,
The
you
keys,
going through the keys, you going through, just the conversations with the corrections and where I was at, a lot of them they showed a lot of prejudice and racism towards towards a prisoner, towards a convict. So
wow,
so so it's just amazing how like the similarities that we have, that we go through with being in the system and then coming out and having to readjust. I don't care what it is.
right,
I heard you say earlier in terms of time, the time. It could be a year. That's being away for a year. And then coming out to back into society is that's trauma right there. That's traumatic. Even that's
yes,
you have to readjust. Then life moves fast. Life isn't it waits for no one. So for you to be going for
right,
5, 10, 20, 30 years, that is you know what I mean? It's all an adjustment phase. I had to come home to technology world. Um Fortunately I prepared
right,
myself. So I went to prison without a GED and I came home with my master's degree. And so I engulfed
wow,
in school. When I was in prison, I engulfed myself in school, and by doing that,
right,
we had the basic computer, with word processor, and so I began to learn that while I was in there. But life waits for no one. Life society
that's
waits for
right.
no one out here. So when I came out here to this MacBook Pro, I'm still learning this computer and this phone that I when I left this wasn't this wasn't even heard of. I was dealing with a phone
Right.
that you put into your lighter in your car with a big with a big what's the name? Uh
The bag,
okay. Yeah,
the
so
bag. Sometimes you have the bag.
huh?
I said that you back in the day, they had a bag that was attached to some of the phones.
Yeah,
Long time ago in the
we
90s.
had the big phone that you carry with
Yeah,
you and you could put it in your lighter to light it up.
right.
So that's when I left. I left in 1993, February 1993.
Wow.
I left, I was sentenced and convicted in 1994 to 25 years. So, so to come out here
Wow.
now and also a lot of times we have to identify those mental health issues within ourselves because if we don't, we almost doomed. You know, yes, someone else may
Right.
see the signs, but you know, a lot of times you hiding it. Like you said, you stayed in the house, or but you had people, someone to see. Oh, listen, this
Right.
might be, you might be experiencing this. Like you said, when we young and we not educated on it, you know, we don't know the terms. We know it's something. There's something going on.
Right.
I'm waking up at this time every day and I'm rolling over like, but we don't know the terms until we, you know, educate ourselves to it.
That's
So
right.
you know, I say that was, you know, that's a good thing that you acknowledge that and seeing that. And so if you could talk about like, so what Marsha is doing now, like what you have going in life, and how's that how's that going? You know, from
So
2020.
so once I was released, I knew I wanted to advocate, but first I wanted to deal with my mental health issues. But I still did a little bit of advocating with the women that were still left behind. Um, Once I was released from probation, Eric, the sky was the limit for me because I didn't like having to keep reporting everything to my probation officer. So once I was released from
Mm-hmm.
probation in August, I was able to just start living my dream. And my dream has always been to go to different states and talk to the district attorney in regards to cases that need exoneration and then cases
Nice.
that a significant sentence reduction is needed. So it was like as soon as I was released from probation, I was on a flight going out to Memphis and start advocating for those brothers that's in the state of Tennessee prison. So I've been actively doing that.
Mm,
And then I received a job as vice president with a More Just America Action Fund, which they are a 501c4 and they're 501c3. So, and all of us are justice impacted. Everybody has been incarcerated prior. So it's like just when I was on probation, it's like God just opened up the floodgates and I was just doing everything that I wanted to do as far as advocating. But it was like a year before that, the preparation began it with working with dream.org because
mm-hmm.
dream.org, I received a call and was like, we want to interview you for this internship. Can you interview? And I was like, sure, but I'm in Memphis right now on vacation. It was like, it won't take but a moment. And that really was the beginning of me learning everything that I thought I knew
Nice.
about
Yeah.
advocating. And the
Nice.
internship, it was supposed to be for 3 months and it lasted 6 months. And I learned so much as far as because they were behind the First Step Act. So I was like, how ironic that I was working with them. But the things that they taught me and the things that I learned from being in these meetings were just mind blowing. And it was almost just like a spiritual thing, a preparation of things that you thought you knew, but you really don't know.
Yeah.
And then I was able to be in
But-
their cohort right after the internship. So everything I
mm,
learned about lobbying, the continued mentorship, even after the cohort and the internship, these people still was like, you can still every other week, we'll still help you with whatever it is that you need support. And it gave me the courage that I needed to get before these district attorneys and to argue as to why mercy and grace should be granted, or second chance or second review should be granted in
ma-
these cases.
nice.
So
Yeah.
it's been a whirlwind, and it's like sometimes I have to pinch myself because let me tell you something, Eric. I be scared when I go in sometimes. Well, when the
Mm-hmm.
thought of like, okay, I got to go in tomorrow, and I have to convince this district attorney, and I have prior convictions, but I have to convince them to review this case and give it a second chance. So
Right.
once I get in there, it's like everything that I would have wanted somebody to do and say for me, the
You
passion
do
just
for
comes out.
it
And
comes right
before I
out.
know it, I have their attention.
That's
It
beautiful.
comes right
Let me
out.
just
So
let me stop
I've
you
been
for a second. I'm sorry.
okay.
I'm sorry for cutting your spiel because it's beautiful and I want you to continue. But I just wanted to say
Okay.
something to that, like that your purpose, that's your purpose. So I see that, once we have this purpose of ours in life and we go down that road, nothing else matters. The nervousness, the being
Yes.
scared, that's natural. That comes with anything. That comes with, and I tell brothers that, when we had to go before a parole board to get home. We could get hit with 2 years when we have life in prison. And every time you go in there, I don't care if you went in there. If I know brothers that got hit 7 times. 2 years
Wow.
every 2 years, and every time you go in there, you're gonna be nervous. You know what I mean? But
Right.
I tell them, look at your purpose, man. Your purpose in life, if you really truly change your life, is to get home and help and contribute with your family. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
that right there. Nothing else matters. And a series of events happened with me. I was supposed to came home 2017 because that's when I first served my 27 years, my 25 years. Sorry. And when I went to the board, I made the board unanimously. We had three parole commissioners, and all
Okay.
three granted me parole to come home in 2017, my first board. But they took it back. They snatched my date back from me because the family and the judge and DA opposed my release. They gave opposition once they found out the commissioners granted me parole. I was in prison for killing a young man, just like myself, that was 20 years old, didn't deserve to die. That I
Yeah.
can't change. That I can never go back and change that. And that hurts me, and that will hurt me for the rest of my life. However, that has made me, who I am today. That made me a better
Right.
man to speak on his behalf as well as mine and others that's coming after us. You know, um,
Right.
to not be in those streets, and go through this beef of this my block, and I'm selling
Yes.
drugs over here, when and so I look at today in my life. I look at, you know um first and foremost, to you, I just want to apologize to you as well, and I do this to everyone, for being that person that was out there selling poison to my community. Because if I knew what I know now when I was younger, I would never done that. If the education
Yeah.
that I have now, I would never have put no poison in my community or nobody else's, nowhere. And so, that part, it really hurts, and that's a stain on me. However, I'm not
Yeah.
defined by who I was. I'm defined by who I am now.
That's
That's how
right.
I define myself. And so I don't have a problem. I'm an open book. I don't have a problem with sharing my story, and what I because of where I am today, and the positive that
Yeah.
I live today, and no longer that negative life, growing up in
That's
the
right.
streets of the Bronx. So that helps me and guides me and on this path. Also, um, I created this platform for brothers and sisters like you and myself, um, that that are able to come home and make a difference in society. Not only come home and
Yeah.
stay home, but also making that difference. Being that positive person that one can look up to now. So when I was in this prison called Sing Sing Correctional Facility, very progressive prison. We created a whole bunch of family self-help therapeutic programs, family uh, programs, we fatherhood programs. We created a lot of different programs, organizations like we spoke about earlier. But I was sitting down, and I used to go to the graduations, and so in Sing Sing they have an associate's, a bachelor's, program through Mercy University, which
Okay.
was Mercy College, and now it's Mercy University. And they have a master's degree program, which is NYTS, New York Theological Seminary, where you receive your
Okay.
master's in professional studies and theology. And and I graduated from both those schools. Prior to me graduating and after, I always participated in the graduations. And so that's where
Wow.
families and the community have come in and organizations have come back in and celebrate with us, graduate, and
Right.
we would change the whole visit room like it's a university. You wouldn't even know it's a visiting room in the prison that
Right.
I was in because we transformed it. We have food, everything for the families that came and seen us graduate. We walked down the aisle. We had our cap and gowns, everything like you really didn't know. And so a lot of celebrities came to our graduation too. Whoopi Goldberg, Harry Belafonte, God bless his soul. Warren Buffett was at my graduation. Ice T and Coco. You know, we had a lot of people that used to support um our transformation. You know, so it was in there that I seen brothers coming back in that went home and that was making a difference in life now out in society.
Yeah.
So they inspired me. I always said when I go home, I'm coming back. And so when I came home in 2020, the next year I went back in for the first time at a graduation to see brothers that I knew that I left behind, and that was so inspirational. It was a wake up call too because I'm married and my wife has been with me for 14 years and we've been married for
Wow.
12 years and we've been married for 12. And so she comes back into her coming into that system every weekend just about to visit me, bringing that package. Now I'm walking the very steps that she's carrying them packages up that I never seen before. That I seen these
Right.
steps for the first time coming home and being able to go back into the system. So that was a
Right.
newfound, respect for women, the mothers, wives, sisters,
Yes.
daughters, nieces, aunts that come back, and because that's who's holding the men down. Make no
Yes.
mistake. There are very few other men coming in, holding men down. Brothers, whether they
Yeah.
brothers or your fathers. So anyway, I mentioned that because I said that when I get home, I want to create a platform that highlights these men that I seen coming back. I knew it was women coming back, but I didn't know any, directly because I was, in this men prison. But I heard of a
Right.
lot of them. So I said when I get home, I want to do this. I want to. I used to sit back and watch Love After Lockdown. I don't know if you ever heard of this program. It's a program called
Yeah, I've
Love After
seen it.
Lockdown where they hook people up and Love in New York. And I
Hmm.
said, yo, when I get home, I want to follow the brothers and sisters that I know and know of that's formerly incarcerated, that's home and making a difference
Right.
because I want to minimize that recidivism rate that society looks at all too much and feel like we all going back. Those that been there, we got this,
Right.
stereotype on us. Like once you in jail, you're always a prisoner. Once a prisoner,
Right.
always one. And so I came home to create this platform, and in the process of creating a network platform, a reality
Right.
series, I created this podcast, to share with those men and women across this country that's doing. And so I look for us to stay in touch, with each other
Yes.
because I know that you connected with a lot of sisters that we would like to
Yes.
showcase and highlight on this platform right here. Another thing, if I could ask you about your company, 13th Liberation Village, that you spoke about. Could you speak more into that too and what you do?
Yes, so we go and do third party advocating, and a lot of people say they've never heard of third party advocating. What a third party advocate is basically if a person is facing trial or post conviction, I act as a liaison between the person that's experiencing the criminal justice systems and their attorney. I've had some great, and believe it or not, I've had some great experiences working with the women attorneys. The men attorneys, a lot of them, I think they don't like the accountability. And then someone that's coming in that's prior incarcerated, that they feel are not on their level, that's really trying to make sure that they do exactly what they're supposed to do. So sometimes, depending on who the attorney is, that depends on how their situation. Well, the situation. I'm not gonna say how the situation work out, because primarily I'm there to make sure that the defendant is afforded every right that they're supposed to be provided by the Constitution. And then on the incarceration side, we act as really a surrogate mother or a surrogate family to those that are incarcerated. I have a mentorship program that I'm in the midst of creating, that will offer mental health services. I have a certified mental health counselor that I work with. So we're going to offer mental health, coping skill programs. We're going to make sure that they have phone minutes. We'll make sure that they get commissary, they get their different quarter packages. But we're just going to come in as a support. And then, of course, we advocate for them if there's an issue in the prison that the prison is not addressing. We just recently addressed an issue in the Tennessee prisons, where one of the prisons wasn't giving the men adequate heat during the freezing temperatures on last week. And we had organizations all over the world, all of them just as impacted, that we all did a phone bank, and we called in to West Tennessee prison. And the men said within minutes they were warm. So
No
that is
question.
what 13 Liberation does. So
Wow.
it's
You
just what the name is. It's just liberating. We try to give them a
no
sense of freedom
question.
established. I also want to develop this reentry program that I've been working on, because I think that reentry, and a lot of people may disagree, reentry starts really in prison. You have to
That's
start the
right.
preparation there.
Ooh,
And then I
you
think
speak
another
to my
thing that's
father.
beneficial. Yeah. And I think that too, people that are just as impacted need to have more support from those like us that have been through what they've gone through, because we tend to understand certain things that they're experiencing as they prepare to go home and when they're home, which takes sometimes some time for the family to understand. Because, of course, the way that we speak, I know when I first came home, Eric, I was aggressive. Okay. But you become aggressive because, in prison, you have that aggressive environment. In the last 3 years of my incarceration, the environment changed because the security was increased. So I was started to be surrounded by more aggressive and younger women that sometimes, whereas the older women that I experienced the first 2 years that said please and thank you and were similar to me, were being replaced with more aggressive women, women that had mental health, untreated mental health issues. And then you had women that were repeated offenders that you were surrounded with. So I had to get a little bit more aggressive, and then it follows me when I came home. So um, I think that me being around people that are formerly impacted, it helped me to start transitioning to a little bit better, because my family didn't understand. Because it's not, the aggressive person is not the person that they knew, but I needed to have time to readjust back to society and shed some of those ways that I actually accumulated while I was in prison. So I think that is so important that we continue to support each other once we're released. I'm a big advocate of that. I had a sister to reach out to me today that is just going through so bad with her mental health because she's having a hard time finding a job. So I was like, we're all so close knit. we should never have someone out here suffering. And she was like, well, people call me to uplift. We got to do more than
That's
uplift
right.
each other. Sometimes we have to make ourselves available to offer some financial help too while that person deals with their mental health. So I'm a big advocate of being a support to each other in whatever way is needed, um, whether they're in prison or out.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's and look, you spoke on it with reentry. Being starting from the inside. My partner, if he was here, oh, he'll have a earful for you on that. And it's a
Yes.
fact that in there we well, I can only speak for New York State because that's the only place I've been to. But in New York State, what they do is they have this little reentry program like 90 days before you go home when and then they feel that okay you ready and half the times in there it's nothing but them giving us information of places that we might want to go to upon our release, but
Right.
they don't do it until the last 30 to 90 days before you 90 to 30 days before you actually released. So
So when do
everything
you think it
else.
should start, Eric?
Oh, it starts as soon as you go in. That's when it should start. As soon as you come into that
That's what I
system,
said.
and that's a
I
fact because like I always said this it helped like reentry like just my self introspection is what helped me. I I was one that grew up in the streets, you know, from 14, 12 years old to 20. And everything, and I just told this story too, everything in my vocabulary, every sentence was the N word. I used to call my brothers the N, or anybody else. Used to call females B's, the B word.
okay.
When I first went into the system, I was dealt with a lot of trauma and a lot was on my shoulders. And me
Right.
receiving 25 years. So I said, something told me, I said, listen, you have to want it for yourself, man. You say you don't want to do this no more. You don't want to be having this girl, that girl. I was a cheater, liar, and everything else, disrespected women to the fifth power, and so I told myself I didn't want to do that no more. I said that's not you. I was telling myself, and so this was like 2 years into my 25 years to life, and so I vowed that I would never ever have more than one girl. I wasn't married then, I said, but whatever girl I have, that's the one I'm gonna be with. If I break
Right.
up with her, then I'll go with another one. But I'm not juggling two or more, none of that no more. That's not gonna happen.
That's
I
right.
said I will never use the N word again. I've never used that word again since my 2 years being into that 27 years and 6 months. So and I said I would never call a female to be and never done it unless I'm using some type of showing an example or something like that. I still don't use it. I still say the N or the B. The word don't come off my tongue, slide off my tongue,
Yes.
with no ease at all.
That's
Just the
right.
the just the just the word the N that don't slide off easy. Just knowing that what it is, and so I'd say that to say that I had to go through this reentry with myself. I had to say, yo, enough is enough with the yard. I'm not going to the yard, the gym, to click up with nobody, no dudes no more. I'm closing my gate and I'm doing my self introspection of myself. And that allowed
Right.
me to say, yo, listen, I was already going to the law library, stay in there more, learn about the law more, because this is why you in here. This is what's gonna
Right.
get you out. That was my motto, and other older brothers that told me this, look, this would
Yeah.
got you in here. You came in here through the court, so you have to do everything you can in your powers to, get yourself out through the court. Because when I had 25, I never thought I'd live. That was a
Right.
no-no. I wasn't gonna make 25. I seen people when I was young go to prison that was from our block, older brothers that grew up around. Let's say a
Hmm.
brother that I know named Smitty. This is a real story. He received 25 to life. That was my older brother's friend. And once he got it, we was like, oh, he never coming home. So that was my mentality. When I went to
Yeah.
jail and received 25 years, that I'm never getting out of here. That's a wrap. So I think it starts at the beginning. Soon as
Yeah.
you come in, because there's a lot that beginning stage can do, because there's a lot of trauma and turmoil and all type of stuff happening to one that receives a bid like that. That can
Yes.
hopefully turn that person around, because guess what? When you coming in, soon as we come in, we are faced with the yard or the gym.
Right.
And that's where our influences are still at, because our environment is still the same in there. I
Right.
beg to say that there's more drugs a lot of times in prison than the streets. you know,
Yeah.
because it's just crazy where I came from in New York State. So if we could grab that attention at that beginning stage, I think that would be helpful to transitioning others faster than the normal, because I'm the
Right.
exception to the rule. And I say this with all humility. I just was blessed to have
Right.
the capacity to say enough is enough, and have the will and the determination to go another route. But a lot of brothers that I grew up with, it took them 10, 15 years, 20 years before they got it, before they said, oh, I want to do this reentry thing. I want to, you know what I'm saying? I want to take this
Yeah.
introspection within myself. I want to help myself to prepare for home. A lot of them never get it.
Yeah.
So that's definitely important. That's definitely
Yeah.
important
I agree.
to what's the name, to have at the beginning. And my brother uh Anthony, the next time we do speak, he has a lot to say about that, because the mental health component of that alone, is what I think determines one's, I guess, one's ability to cope with the prison system and society when coming back home.
Right.
Because a lot of us,
I
we
agree.
come out and we
I
don't
agree.
we don't yeah, we come out and we don't like, we don't got it, we don't get it, and then we back in prison. You know what I mean? Or we
Yeah.
self-medicating, or we killing ourselves because we can't handle
Right.
this. This is really overwhelming. When I came home, this was overwhelming to me.
Yes.
However, I prepared myself while I was in there. So, although, like when you said, you still be scared when you go before these judges and or DAs, look, listen, I was scared shitless. I was
Yeah.
so scared, but at the same time, I knew that my walk, my preparation prepared me for this.
Right.
And so anytime I went to do my application, to put my resume in, I had my resume. I had 3 different resumes before I came home, because I was certified welder. I was a teacher's aide. You know what I mean? I had my MPS. I had my master's degree in theology, and so and I was I am a hard worker. So I knew that
Yeah.
I couldn't be stopped in society. I knew I couldn't be stopped in corporate America. That's just how I was when I was selling poison to the community. I was all in,
Yeah.
10 toes down, all in. So that's how I was going to be on a positive path, all in. And so when I came home, it was nothing for me to get a job here. And I worked for and with an organization called Exodus Transitional Community. Um, And
Okay.
Exodus, we do the same thing that you do. We have we have different trauma compartments that we deal with, people that's formerly incarcerated that's coming home, and we get them situated. It's also, we also have Exodus inside the prison system as well, where
Okay.
we help them and prepare them
Wow.
upon their release. And what we do is we go advocate at the courts. We have a department, and
Ooh,
a brother that's on
yes.
now. There's a brother. Yes, there's a brother that's on now. He's down at the bottom right now. He's a part of Success After Lockdown. I told you we were we were getting this network thing together to follow people like yourself and
Yeah.
us formerly incarcerated. And he's our pilot project. Without going too much
Okay.
into his story, um, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to share this with you because you mentioned what you do, and we do similar to what you do with your organization. Um, he served 30 years, and he had a son while he was in
Wow.
prison. So we have conjugal visits, and he had his son, and his son
Okay.
is now NYPD. His son has been
Wow.
NYPD since he been home, and so he's our pilot project of our reality series that we created. And he can share with you because he's a part of the
Okay.
court system, the judicial court system. You know, that we go into the courts and advocate for those people, that so the judge won't send them to prison. We advocate for the alternative, you them bringing that man or woman to Exodus, and
Yes.
for us to help him. You know, I want to just introduce you to my brother, Michael Marshall. Michael Marshall. This is Marsha King. We we can't go into a lot because you came in a little late, but just if you could share with her just for a second, Exodus and what we do at Exodus and what you do at Exodus as ATI, and as far as the court system advocating for the men and women that's in the prison system. You on mute. You got to
Can
take
hear.
yourself off mute.
Um, Good afternoon, Miss King. Good afternoon, my brother. Um,
Yes.
Good
as as
afternoon.
as Mr. Benson was saying, I do work for Exodus Transition Community. And I really believe that we save lives and restore hope. Only because when well, particularly me, I'm I create curriculums. I'm the lead facilitator, and what that entails is when the course
Okay.
asks why should this him or her go, our response will more than likely be that their transition mentally, because this is where it starts. They have given us a direct line to guns, which means they have a gun part made just for ATI, which is
Yeah.
Alternative to Incarceration, and I had to create curriculums just for that. And for me, it's not just the gun or individuals firing the gun; it's the seed that was planted before the gun was even picked up. And this is what I try to address: the monster within. I don't want to talk to the individual that comes in and say, "Oh, good morning, Mr. Marshall," or "Good morning" to any other his friends, right, or associates. I want to talk to individuals that got them there, right? And that's hard because when we try to mold and shape their minds, it's almost as Plato, allegory of the cave, right? We live in caves. These communities are caves. I give you a particular instance that we had to go to the Bronx Criminal Court, me and another co-worker, just to advocate because they don't even know that there's help out there. Our brothers and sisters don't know there's help. So we're actually running up and down the court building on different floors advocating. And just to see the impact, this is one of the things that we do. I was actually at a buffer meeting. This is with a district attorney, right? And the lead district attorney. In this case with Devon Lamar, I think individual named Lamar, and he worked for the youth department, but he got himself in some trouble. He wasn't even the primary shooter at the time. Whatever the case may have been, we sat down with these two individuals, right? His lawyer, district attorney, his mother, him, and two other associates of mine. And as the district attorney started to speak, he made a gesture to the lawyer, and he actually said, "Didn't we talk about giving this guy 5 years?" It blew me away, and my emotions dragged me into the arena. I was like, "What did you just say?" Oh, I said, it has a lot to do with me. We're here representing this young man, and he's not even a primary shooter, and it was going back and forth. He was like, "You're not the lawyer. This case has to be argued in court," and he was going in, and I didn't realize that I was in the battle with this guy, going back and forth with the district attorney. And then I was nudged by one of my associates, like, "Calm down."
Yeah.
They threw their towels in, and they was going in at the guy, right? The guy still had the nerve to say to his mother, "Can you move him away from Taino Projects?" And then I went in again. I was like, "What did you have the disrespect to even ask her to move?" No one has that type of economic stability like that. Just because you have it, you can't disrespect a family who has absolutely nothing to just get up and walk away from this environment. Like, what is wrong with you? You don't even know who you're dealing with. And
Right.
At the end of the day, the district attorney was blown back. His eyes were wide open. I thought I blew it all. But this is the type of fight, like pit bulls, we go in, we bite. And he said, "Okay, the meeting is over. I want to speak to the lawyer." And, I left kind of feeling disappointed because I thought I had lost the case as far as this young man was going to jail. And individuals like, "Yo, don't worry about it. You did good." And, trying to convince me, but I still wasn't convinced. I still felt the way about the incident because I should have not had so much passion involved. But at the end of the day, the young man got 5 years probation,
Oh, wow.
for that fight alone, because this guy definitely wanted to send him to jail for no reason. And right now, I'm undisputed as far as when it comes to these buffers. I went in a few times for individuals and I laid it out. And what I try to do is paint a different picture. These individuals are not just numbers, right? They're not just what's on those docket sheets. They're human beings. And that's what we try to do. Put a character to the theme that these individuals created. They can write a whole paragraph and make you seem like a monster. That's not really who you are. Like, we're not defined by our worst actions. And I don't want these people to think that just because the individuals made poor choices. I don't use the term mistakes because we have to own up to be responsible for what we do. So mistake is not something to be used, right? We have to own up to that. So I think we make poor choices. And we go in fighting with this ideology. I mean, we went all the way to Philadelphia for an individual, and the judge stood up and said, "Y'all came from New York? When you two guys came from New York?" I said, "Yes, we did." And the DA was going in like, "Oh, let's send him." Judge, and the judge said, "Hold on a minute. I know it's on. I have it sit in front of me. I don't want to hear that right now. This is not the same man that came to us months ago." And he's standing, the two individuals standing behind him are from New York City. They came all the way from New York City. So right now, I don't want to hear what you got to say, because in these Commonwealth states, the judge rules everything. You don't even have to speak to the DA. The judge rules. And when this happens, they totally take over. So he shut the district attorney down and says, "This man right here, he's exonerated. It's over." And he had a board where there's only a few of them up there, but he actually had a board where he stuck the deposition up on the board. And so he asked us, "What are you guys waiting for? Y'all free to go?" He says, "No, our client, we want his name on the board." He said, "Oh," jumped down from the podium, walked up, "Come on, Mr. Johnson." And Mr. Johnson was allowed to staple his deposition on the board. "I'm done." And this is what we do. Fight with us. When we're in Connecticut, the fight with us doesn't stop. If you're in New York and you're from New York, if you're doing good in our program, we'll go to different states for you. We'll go to bat for you. And all we ask for you to come to the program, because we need to show them that we're about our business, and we will report back to the courts if you're messing up. So we're not holding no punches. You have to prove that you want to be free and remain free. And when we go into these courtrooms and speak to these district attorneys and judges, I mean, some judges will be like, "Exodus, please step from in front of the podium, step back across. The bus for that charter for Miss such and such is over." I went to one case where this individual, this female, laundered over $250,000, and
wow,
she was boo-hooing. I felt, but the judge said, "We respect you, Exodus, for coming, but the bus for Exodus has left already." And I felt for her, she didn't even get that much time. She actually got the shock program, right? So she did 6 months, right? But I didn't want her to do that.
Yeah.
But the fact that I think her poor judgment in saying that I'm not a criminal, because we've taught her so much, but she didn't absorb the ideology as that. Accept your actions. You know, she accepted everything else.
Right.
She had goal to tell the judge, I'm not a criminal. And she had a
Yeah,
history. This wasn't our first thing. She was more
yeah.
in different states. So
So
we got her a shock program. Was the best what we could do due to the fact of her record alone. She first ever doing time, but she had priors that she did no time for, and I guess they was just fed up for her. But
yeah, let me
something like
chime in for a minute, Mike. That's
yes,
and that's beautifully put too. I'm glad you explained it like that, because I do know Marsha, and you see the footage later on her too, on what she does, and with and how she goes back into the court system as well, because we don't have a lot of time. But I would like to say that Marsha, you can see that the similarities of what's going on
Yes.
and what you do and what we do here in New York. And that's why I think it's so important that we do stay together and make that connection, with
Because
each other.
I love his program. I love it. I never thought of creating a program that people facing pre-trial. I would love to talk more with you, because that will be
mm-hmm,
so beneficial, because we're similar but different, because I go in and just make sure the attorneys communicate with the defendant and they're ensuring that their rights are not violated. But
mm-hmm.
to do a mitigating program, that is awesome, because I
I'm
talked to the
glad you.
DA on the part of post conviction, but I would love what the preventive measure to go in and
Yeah,
keep them from giving these black men all this time.
yeah.
Tennessee, you already know
Yeah,
they're double
And
charging
women,
them as it
black
is.
men and women.
yeah,
You
And
know
the
what I mean?
women.
Black. That's right.
And when I presented them with the data as far as the big disparity, it's huge. So awesome program.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so and also not only do the mitigation part takes place, but also the rehabilitation part takes place. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, to
Where
rehabilitate
where
them before.
that's right. And so when they come to Exodus, we stern on, you got to change this. You got to change that mindset. You got to change that
Yes.
mindset first and foremost, because we get long, you going right back if we get you out. Like you still gonna go back if this not changed. If we don't deal with the mindset, and the growth and development part of this here. So that's a key
That's the
component to that.
Islamic part, because that's what they do. That's how they teach. As far
Mm-hmm.
as they were support. I'm not Islamic, but I applaud them, because they were who were supported to me. And that's one of the things Brother Liner kept saying was, sister, we got to deal with the mindset first before you get out. And I didn't understand that until now.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Big up to the Nation of Islam, the Islamic
Yes,
part of the site, because I grew up around a lot of them too. Attended a lot of classes, and
yes,
they definitely do. That's very, very
yeah.
important to our salvation and our growth and development. So, like, oh my God, we could talk for another hour, but we do have someone else that we need to get on board here. And I want to say that first, if you could share with us, Marsha, like just where we can get in touch with you, can you, just talk about what you're doing and where we can get in touch with you with
Oh,
social media
sis,
platform.
Exodus Transitional Community, MMARSHALL, ETCNY.org. We're a well-rounded community as far as the Exodus. We have wellness departments. We have CTI, which is Center for Trauma Innovation. We have the Wilderness Program and our program as well. We help individuals transition when they re-enter society, or when they come to us with open cases. We try to get them jobs. We get them identification. Our models, when we first come to our program, we ask you, where did you sleep, and when the last meal you had, so we can make sure we get those two primary things out the way. We just do so much, besides court. And the main part is changing the mindset, like Mr. Benson was saying. But
big up to this.
absolutely.
I didn't get that. I didn't
Yeah.
get that website, but I will email you, Mr. Benson, so we can
And you will
change.
have
We can
a
exchange
full
information.
recording of this this interview, this conversation. You're gonna get a full recording of it as well.
Awesome, awesome.
So
But if anyone wants,
sorry.
say it again, Miss. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Say it again.
No, I was gonna say if you can share with us too how we can get in touch with you with with social media, the plug, everything.
Oh, absolutely. So you can just look me up by my first and last name, Marsha, Marsha, last name King, King, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can also contact me by phone, 757-799-8880. And then you can also email me at 13thliberation@gmail.com.
Okay.
Nice. You were saying something before I interrupted you.
I just got so excited listening to Michael because that is what is so needed. When he was telling me how, I just like how you, to me, just listening to you in my mind, I just saw how you just go in and just your present demands the respect of really what the system really supposed to be about, support and preventive measures. If you could just prevent someone from experiencing this and offer them the rehabilitation and the support before, that cuts down on the incarceration or even having to deal with the mental health. So it's just like in
That's
my
right.
mind, I just saw a whole army
Yeah,
walking up
I
and
knew you
walking in
would.
court. And if
Yeah.
we can just get that nationally, what? How
It's
many
kind of crazy
lives will be changed
they come up in there. When you see a black guy come up in there, they think that we're detectives when we actually come up in there. We don't look like we've done a lot of time. So that trust is shielded at first. But when you explain to them, listen, I know what you're going through. I've been there. They was like, what? And they start to open up because they said, you've been impacted just like me, or even worse, because a lot of the individuals are not facing a lot of time that me and Eric Benson have done. Now, I've done 30 years, and they was like, nah. I was like, yes. And a lot of these lawyers are not expressing who these individuals are like we are. Like, we come in and ask the lawyer, excuse me, step aside. We're now the attorneys. And what happens is they want us to represent them, although we're carte blanche to some things, we're actually the mouthpiece of the client. And when a judge here is say, well, they would even ask when we went to Connecticut, Exodus, what do you have to say in place of this? And just to say that they want to hear our voice, they recognize us, and we're on the books, that says a lot. And again, that guy from Connecticut got probation. I actually seen him walking on 125th Street with his baby and his baby's mother, and I was like astounded in the summertime. He had his flip-flops on and shorts. And I was like, okay. That's what I want to see. I want to see you still out here on these streets and doing the right thing.
That's right.
And that's why that's why it's so necessary for us to stay in touch, Marsha. Ms. King, we have to. We definitely have to, because I know that
in my mind, I'm planning a trip up there so I can watch our program.
Yo, once you told me about
yo,
as soon as you told me about liberation and what you're doing, the 13, I knew. I said, wow, it's so similar to what Exodus and what we do here down here as well. And if we could, brainstorm and bring that mitigation factor to where you at, this is what we do. This is what this is our purpose. This is our purpose. So we have a brother. We have the brother Anthony Cologne, my partner. He finally made it in.
Sorry, guys. I just got out of church. Got to go to church.
No
Yeah.
question.
And
So
do you all
so
see,
he
not to interrupt y'all, but y'all see how we all connect so easily? Our experience, we automatic connected.
like we
That
known each
blows
other
me how all
forever.
of us have been incarcerated. And yeah,
Nice, nice. Listen, I definitely appreciate it and your time, and nice to meet you. I'm definitely looking forward to us staying in touch. Um, yeah,
yes,
you taking the trip, we taking the trip. Like I said, it's our purpose and for us and what we do. So when we come into anybody in contact with like yourself, I know that the genuineness is there. You feel it. I feel it through the screen. I don't, and so
yes,
I look forward to formally meeting you, in person.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
again, I know I'm
absolutely.
just
I
coming
look
and I
forward
just want
to
to
it
say hi to
myself. I've been,
everybody.
Talk about it, Anthony.
No, I just wanted to say hi, and I apologize. It was completely on my fault. I got up late today, so usually I do the early morning Sunday service. And had a lot of stuff going on, and my wife didn't want to miss church, so we had to go to the later
It's,
service. We just walked in the door, and that's it. I just
it's
want.
all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all
I'll get
good.
notes on what transpired. I'm sure this was a great interview. I can see it already from the energy that Marsha is displaying, and my brother Muhammad. What's going on, brother?
Hey,
Uh,
bro.
Yeah.
man, and that's it. I just wanted to say hi. That's all. I ain't gonna interrupt. I'm just gonna take my little notes over here from what I see,
Yeah, no, again with me, I just want to thank you again, Marsha, because I see these brothers every day, all day. We just met you for
yeah,
the first time today. So it was definitely my honor and a pleasure. And let's
yes,
stay in touch. If anything else
absolutely.
you have to say before we close out.
No, let's just listen. I'm preaching to the choir with you all. If I could just grab how you all feel and bring that down here, down to the dirty South, because that's what Tennessee folks say they are. I'm in Virginia, but Memphis is
I'm
home,
Puerto
and I
Virginia.
want to, I want to bring what you all are doing, the support on us supporting each other, and just what the love that you all have to keep giving back to the people that's still fighting and those that are facing. If we could just continue to pass that spirit to those that need it, I think that we'll create our own reform.
and,
Mm.
and I feel like we're family now. So anytime you have
Yeah.
anything you need us and you want us to chime in and bring us to a forum,
Listen,
whatever.
I already got a project I'm working on that I definitely like. Michael, I want this, bruh. I need that spirit down there in Memphis with me on this last meeting I got with the DA. You got that ancestral spirit, war spirit. Just you telling me about it, because I'm a well, I know you all are spiritual too, because we get that in our during that time that we have in prison. That's what I need going into that. You all right with me going in like that with that spirit, but it's also a spirit of love and true concern for those that need us. So that is absolutely, you can't replace that spirit. I don't care who. Listen, I brought people in with me, and I'm just like, I need I need that
Yeah,
spirit just right there. So
no question.
absolutely, I know we'll be working together in the future.
No question. And wait till you hear my partner Anthony's spirit on our next conversation with you. You ain't hear nothing yet. But with that,
What part of
I feel
Virginia
enough.
you in, Marsha? What part of
I'm
Virginia?
in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Chesapeake,
Chesapeake, this
Virginia.
is where I caught my Fed charge. Yeah, so I
Okay.
ended up staying here when they released me from COVID. I was scared to move. so,
Oh,
so I just made this the foundation, and then I started working here. So this is where I settled down. But Memphis is where still my heart is to go home and do the work, because it's not a lot of people doing the work there. Like, it's needed.
Right. Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
No, it's funny.
Absolutely.
Chesapeake, because that's the name of my street that I live on, is Chesapeake.
Oh, okay.
That's in Florida.
But
Chesapeake, Florida. Okay, so again, Marsha, like, you know, I really appreciate it, and definitely be looking out for us,
Yes.
staying in touch with you,
Okay. Absolutely.
and vice
Absolutely.
versa.
Thank you
Because
for having
we
me.
definitely may want you on sometime sooner than later, because you have a lot to offer.
Absolutely. We'll
Our,
be talking in
our
between too,
audience.
Eric.
Okay. All right. So, you know, with that said, you know, I have to go out, the right way. You
All
know,
right.
yeah, you already know.
New Year's, we'll talk again. I'm sorry again. Everybody stay up, stay blessed. Sunday blessings. And don't forget that you're highly favored.
I love that. I received that.